Welcome to Michigan Reimagined, a Spotlight podcast. And here's your host, Chris Buck.
Mental health has become a significant concern for many, and there's a certain sense of urgency needed when it comes to helping our children navigate life's challenges. Here to share one Grand Rapids-based organization's efforts in this space is the president and CEO of Wedgwood Christian Services, Dr. Daniel Gowdy. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
So as I mentioned in the intro, mental health, fast-growing concern. Can you share how's that measured?
Well, over the last few years, we've been talking about this mental health tsunami that's facing our youth. But pre-pandemic levels, we already saw things trending in a bad direction. We saw increases, diagnosis of anxiety, depression, eating disorders, and then we got hit by the pandemic.
Right.
And then we knew that the additional isolation, we knew reduction in social interaction would only accelerate the trajectory we already were anticipating. And the stats, unfortunately, Chris, are proving right. There is a crisis in our adolescent and child mental health. Each year, UNICEF publishes this grand report on, the nutrition and physical health of our children. But in 2021, for the first time, their report was on children's mental health.
Right.
It's pretty amazing. We see the American Academy of Pediatrics. We see the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry. The Children's Hospital Association have all declared kids' mental health a national emergency. The stats are really overwhelming. 4 out of 10 high school students experience persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness. Imagine that.
Hopelessness.
53% of adults with children are worried about their child's mental health, and our African-American community have been hit disproportionately. African-American children under 13, are twice as likely, Chris, to die of suicide than their white peers. The rate of death by suicide among black youth has increased faster than any other racial or ethnic group. And then in December, the U.S. Surgeon General issued a rare public advisory to address the urgent public mental health crisis of our children, adolescents, and adults. For those that are on the front lines, this is just the tip of the iceberg. The CDC published a national youth risk behavior survey. This is a 10-year longitudinal study. It's the first time that we got to see from 2011 inside of the pandemic, 2021. And what we saw was overwhelming. In addition to overall mental health issues, suicidal thoughts increased as well. Get this, 14% of boys, 30% of girls seriously considered suicide, and 14% of boys and 24% of girls actually put a plan together.
Unbelievable.
7% of boys actually attempted it, but 13% of girls also attempted it. It used to be that girls planned and boys followed through.
Right. Now,
girls are planning and girls are following through. Losing one child to suicide, right? It's too much. But we're talking about, on average, 1 in 10 children right now, based on that 2021 longitudinal study, are attempting suicide. Our kids are struggling, and the state of our child, Chris, is in peril.
Yeah. Well, I think about growing up, and you don't have to wander social media too long where you see people of my generation in my 50s, hearkening back to, riding our bikes over homemade ramps and playing out in the woods and just being eyeball to eyeball with our peers. And as the father of 2 college age boys, I can tell you, the incessant streaming of not only shows and binge watching YouTube videos and social media, and then, the video gaming, everything's kind of done with this kind of filter, right? So it just seems like the human interaction has kind of the direct face-to-face, you figured things out, you learned some stuff, you argued, you got your heart broken, all those things kind of are alive. So I guess, how do you fix a problem like this?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, our kids, in essence, are guinea pigs when it comes to the smartphone and the social technology. I mean, it seemed harmless, right, at the time, right? But it changed behavior so quickly, so fast, and it had a detrimental effect, right?
Right.
And so this little invention called the forward-facing camera, right? Mm-hmm. Right. And so comparing it has really impacted our kids' self-esteem, has and continues to. And girls are disproportionately affected, and I think ties into some of these suicide rates. A recent article about Child Mind Institute stated that girls and women 16 to 25 spend over 5 hours taking and improving their selfies. A Wall Street Journal, right? 5 hours. A Wall Street Journal article uncovered research by Instagram. This is Instagram research over several years. That said 32% of girls said that they felt bad about their bodies. Instagram made them feel worse. It also found that comparisons on Instagram can change how a young woman view and describe themselves, and that teens blame that platform for increased anxiety and depression. This is an Instagram research. And psychologists are getting on board, and they're doing their own research on this. Jonathan Haidt, who's done extensive research on Gen Z, talks about that girls are enamored with these visual platforms, and he calls it compare and despair. So because they compare themselves to posts of others with their seemingly perfect lifestyle, and by 2020, more than 20% of female teenagers had major depression compared to 9% of boys. I'm really worried for our young girls in this. And he goes on and he says, because of smartphones and social media specifically, Gen Z, because of the risk of rise of technology among their most influential years, right?
Yep.
He said, we look at Americans born after 1995 and we find that they have an extraordinary high rates of anxiety, depression, self-harm, suicide, and fragility. There has never been a generation this depressed, this anxious, and this fragile.
So who's Wedgwood Christian Services, and how did you get involved, and what's your mission?
Wedgwood is started in 1960. Wedgwood Christian Services extends God's love to youth, families, and adults, professional counseling and education services. We've been on the front lines dealing with some of the toughest situations, toughest cases Michigan youth and families have had to deal with. And we find ourselves once again on the front lines for such a time as this, for what's saving our youth. And this is not just affecting the youth, but generations to come.
So I mentioned you're a Grand Rapids-based organization. So do you have a brick and mortar facility? And if so, kind of where is it, and what would I see if I wandered around campus?
Sure. We do have intensive residential treatment in Kentwood, which is southeast Grand Rapids, where we serve youth and families from all over the state. I think last year was 43 different counties. We had individuals that come through our program. They receive expert, grace-filled care. We also have outpatient services in Grand Rapids, Muskegon, Holland, in North Grand Rapids as well. We serve youth and adults that are experiencing anxiety, depression, dealing with some crisis of their own, trauma, and substance abuse. About a third of our care is in the clinic. About a third, we pivoted the rest of the world with doing telehealth. And then about a third, actually, of our services are done in the client's home or out in the community where they feel safe and brave to do so. We have licensed counselors, psychiatrists, and so forth with immediate openings to address the challenges in front of us. Our growth plan, Wedgwood needs to grow because of the need for Wedgwood is growing, and we hope to add 33% more staff, add another 100 staff just by this time next year to try to address the mental health concern of youth, adults, and families that Michiganders are facing.
So if I'm a parent of a child that I'm worried about, or if I'm a teenager who's struggling and can't seem to find the resources, how would I engage Wedgwood? Like, what's the intake process, or how do I raise my hand and say, I need help that you seem to be able to provide? Yeah,
the website is always a great place to go. We're on the social medias.
Yeah, got to go where they are, right?
Exactly. But wedgwood.org, it's only one E, WEDGWOOD. Wedgwood is named after one of our founders 63 years ago, Dr. Wedgwood. Wedgwood.org, WEDGWOOD. You can see our services, and has numbers and contact information for each of these service lines. So whether that be a residential treatment, which we specialize in human trafficking, substance abuse residential. There's only 2 of its kind in Michigan, and we also have counseling, trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy, crisis community management. So this might be an individual who just recently might have attempted suicide, is in the hospital. We'll go in the hospital, have that first conversation there, and then have intensive therapy 3 times a week after that, and helping re-engage into the community and get back on their feet and address and to deal with the trauma that might be in their life and helping cope with it. And we also have autism services where we serve early intervention, 3 to 7, 8 years old, and then 8 to 12 is our after-school program as well.
So how are you funded? Who are your partners? The services that are provided, is it covered by insurance, or is it? How does that all work?
Yeah, we are covered. We are partnered with most insurance providers in the area, but our partners are the parents, the guardians, local community mental health agencies, as well as Michigan Department of Health and Human Services, and some amazing philanthropic donors all across Michigan. We're really, really blessed with that. So we couldn't make it work without some amazing people in our community that not only have a heart but have a vision for this generation and the generation to come.
Well, this is such a fantastic topic, and I want to take a moment to thank our sponsor who put today's show together. So when it comes to managing your finances and planning for your future, I suggest you call my friends at Wagner Financial. Whether you're just getting started, getting ready to retire, or anywhere in between, Wagner Financial can help you make smart financial decisions. Don't navigate this complex problem on your own. Wagner has the expertise to help you feel confident that you're making the right financial choices. Contact an advisor by calling 517-853-3367 or visit their website at wagnerfinancial.com. So, Dan, you were talking, or I noticed that you had a State of the Child discussion, right? Yeah. So this was an event that concerned parties all attended to learn and share and all that stuff. Talk a little bit about where that event was hosted and what was unpacked at that conference. I appreciate this.
It was such a fun event. About 170, 180 stakeholders from across the state came together who all had a heart and a passion for all the things we described about the state of the child in peril, and what can we do about it as individuals, as parents, as community members, and with this vision of creating a brighter future for these children and so forth. So, but we came together at Frederick Martyr Gardens, had 170, 180 individuals there, and they were parents, they were educators, they were clinicians, they were medical providers, and other like providers that wanted to learn about the realities facing our children, but also come together and strategize and support and seek out a better and brighter future. And we had individuals that were seeking services as well. The other thing that came about, Chris, was, and this was a side effect, it was the child provider network in Michigan is fragmented. And these are amazing people doing amazing work when no one is looking. Because it's the right thing to do. And them coming together is such encouraging and uplifting to each other, exchanging cards and following up. I'm still following up from that event and just making connections and say, hey, how can we leverage each other? Because the need is growing so great. And so it's not competition. It's co-opetition. Right. And we're coming together because there's a higher calling. There's something larger than self. There's something larger than our bottom line. There's something larger than just our egos. We're really coming together, and that's what's been a real blessing, Chris, in this event. And so we taught this national emergency. In essence, it comes down to our ability as individuals to respond with what's in front of us.
So you painted kind of a picture that you had all these people that were really caring and trying to work in this space, but they were almost ignorant of this community, and that there were other people feeling and seeing and witnessing these same problems. And so was the call to action to kind of create a collaboration amongst these individual kind of care providers and concerned parents and citizens and kind of create a community around it?
I think so, and it's been organic in that process. And for right now, we're connecting with each other. We're staying engaged. Hey, did you hear? Do you know about such and such who's doing this on the employment side? Do you know about this who's doing some really creative stuff with families and counseling? And do you know about and connecting and relating and moving forward? Because There again, the need is great and so forth. But we came together with advocate. We need more funds. Yeah, I think until we as a community, and I love roads without potholes, But I think as a community, as a state, we got to come to grips and say, okay, what is our legacy? Is it going to be flat, smooth roads? Or are we going to focus our priorities about addressing this crisis that's in front of us? And I don't know if we want to leave a legacy of smooth roads when we have the breadth of issues and concerns and difficulty that our young people are facing right now. And it's not just them; it's the next generation. I'll get into a second, but advocating over integration of mental health care and primary care, encouraging community-based systems to connect with mental health programs and making those connections, whether that's safe and safe places to live with family. If you've been just trafficked, you need a safe place, one, and then you could talk to me about counseling and dealing with the trauma.
Yep.
Advocate for increased strategies to increase the number of mental health providers. We all know about with the workforce and participation rate, and as the need is growing, our workforce is shrinking. So this talk about the perfect storm that's in the mental health care, and we want to advocate for insurance for mental health care in all its forms.
So I was just going to ask, what would you say success looks like for Wedgwood Christian Services? Is it possible to eradicate mental health challenges, or just trying to put a significant dent and lower those statistics? And, kind of where do we head from here, and how much can we possibly plan to have happen?
Yeah, we're not just taking care of the individual that's in front of us. We're taking care of their children, because we need to stop the generational cycle. And so for us, that is when the child comes to us with mental behavioral trauma, provide an opportunity for they can heal so that they can keep their child from trauma. So it's on an individual basis. But then the scope is so broad and so prolific that we need to no longer think in our lane. We need to somehow think beyond that and be integrative in that. So we envision a community transformed by one child at a time, equipped for a brighter future. So because we're not just serving the current generation, it's that generation and that generation. I'll tell you a quick story. I was at Grand Rapids Business Journal, 40 Under 40, right? See, these are the future leaders of West Michigan. And I was there representing one of our staff who was up for an award. And I saw a young business owner, and who we were going to partner with. She does recruiting. She's amazing talent. And I went up to her, shook her hand. Hey, we're going to do some work together. Looking forward to it. She saw my name tag, Dan Wedgwood.
Yeah.
She goes, "You work for Wedgwood?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "I used to live at Wedgwood. I was a Wedgwood client. When I was 16 years old in the Runaway Program, Wedgwood taught me what a good parent looked like. Wedgwood taught me that there is somebody in this world I could trust." And at that moment, Chris, a young 9-year-old girl came up and grabbed her leg and said, Mommy, can we go now?
Wow.
It all came together for me. Yeah. We're not serving that individual when she was a 16-year-old running away from a horrible situation. We're serving her children. And that child that grew up at 9 years old, grabbing her leg and is like, "Okay, we got to go. I'm done dealing with all these adults," never knew the trauma that her mother knew. Because there was somebody who intervened at the right place at the right time with professional but grace-filled care and met that young 16-year-old girl when she needed it with the right thing. And that her daughter never has to know the trauma that she grew up with, because we interjected in the right way at the right time. And we can do that. And that's the vision for us in our community, to serve one child at a time. But we need to, an understanding that child, and we like to say it at Wedgwood, the things we do count for eternity. The things we do, we know we do, count for generations to come. But I'm concerned, Chris. Yeah. I'm concerned that if we don't broaden our scope, get our eyes up and look out, we could lose a whole generation.
Well, there couldn't be a more important topic, and I'm really grateful that you were able to spend the time with us. We've been speaking with the president and CEO of Wedgwood Christian Services, Dr. Daniel Gowdy. Dan, thanks for sharing your mission. Thank you for the work you're doing. Couldn't be more important. Remind everyone of the website again.
Thank you, Chris. Wedgwood.org, WDGWOD.org. Thank you.
All right, Wedgwood.org. They will tell you how to get involved and tell you some stories that'll break your heart and force you into action. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Chris.